What's up guys, welcome back to the channel. I have tried to make this video at least 3 times now, and every single time I make a video, I end up scrapping it because I go use the camera and my thoughts change again and again. And this is like the third time that my thoughts have changed and I am reshooting it, but this is my final video. Today I am talking about the Nikon ZF, the Nikon ZF, whatever the you want to call it. This camera has been so confusing to me because I have wanted this camera for the longest amount of time. I finally got the camera. I had such huge expectations and I was quickly shaken up because I felt that it didn't deliver, but boy, was I wrong. Now, when it comes to ranking this camera, who am I to rank it? But in my own personal ranking and expectation, I really broke this down into 4 different categories. We're gonna go over cost, performance, availability, and shooting experience. First, let's start with cost. Cost is kind of weird on this camera because brand new, it retails for around $1,900 everywhere. You can find this camera in combos with the 40mm f2, or you can find it by itself. Inversely, Adorama has a used copies of this camera right now marketed as good or average, or I'm not really sure the condition, but I want to say it was around $14.98, $14.38. So you can get this camera on the secondary market much cheaper than you can brand new. The used market on these are absolutely atrocious. This camera has not held value very well in the few years that has been out. I'm not sure if it's because the turnaround is so fast or people buy it, they can't get used to it, they sell it. I have no idea, but I would much rather recommend, if you're gonna buy this camera, get you a used one while you can. Do not buy it brand new if you don't have to, unless you're just really big on like warranties and things like that. But for a $500 difference, I would say 1000% buy this used. We're gonna jump right into performance. I really don't want this to be a tech review, but the performance on this camera is absolutely fantastic. It really handles very well. It's a 24 megapixel camera. I wanna say it's like 24.5 megapixels. It's also marketed as having 14 stops of dynamic range, maybe 14.5 stops. Everything has a half on this camera. It does have IBIS, a dedicated black and white mode dial right here on the back of the camera, which makes it really easy to switch back and forth between monochromatic images and color images. It also shoots 10-bit log. It has a 4K 60 with a crop, 4K 30 no crop with the full use of the sensor. And one of my favorite things is highlight weighted metering, which you would think all cameras should have. This one does. I love it. Next up is availability. As I stated earlier in cost, this camera is available everywhere you buy cameras. That sounded like a commercial, but seriously, if you want to buy a camera, they have these everywhere. Every camera store has one. They're probably going to have a solo one. They're going to have a kit. They're going to have a used copy. There's going to be a refurbished copy. This camera is in complete abundance and you will have no hard time finding it. Lastly, I want to jump into shooting experience, which is easily and arguably my favorite. You know me, I'm a film shooter at heart. I think that's why I was so disheartened when I got this camera originally, and I didn't immediately love it because shooting experience is something that I value very much so. I like the idea of shooting film, not having to waste so much of my money by shooting digital, and having a camera that has functioning dials and everything that gives the look of a film camera. This is based off of the look of the Nikon FM2 that released in, I want to say, the 80s. Don't quote me. It has a very similar style to that analog feel camera, which I think is the huge desirability of these cameras because you don't have a lot of competition on the market outside of the Fuji realm. This is the only other full frame camera on the market that has a style and look like that. And I think that is extremely sought after and desirable in today's market. Now, personally, shooting experience outweighs a lot of other things to me. I would much rather this camera be 24 megapixels, 12 megapixels with a really fun shooting experience than to be 47, 50, 60 megapixels and it's lifeless or it doesn't have a feel to want to take out. I'm a firm believer in new gear doesn't matter, but if new gear makes you get out and shoot, then it's totally worth its weight in gold. I am a huge feel person, and having a camera that makes you want to grab it. I mean, look at this thing, it's sexy. Who wouldn't want to grab this off their desk, take it out, and shoot for a day? That outweighs a lot of other factors when it comes to choosing a camera that I think you would like and that I would like. If it makes you want to grab it, that's the camera you want to have. I haven't had this camera very long, and I'll be honest, when I first took it out to shoot with it, I loved the experience. It was great. I ended up getting back home and I felt the images were so dull. The color profile was really flat. I shot them in RAW. Um, I don't think I really gave it a real chance. My one recommendation, if you're going to get this camera and you're going to shoot with it, you are going to have to edit your photos. They do have picture controls. I didn't know what that was at first. It's similar to Sony's picture profile or Fuji's film sims, but you can go in and you can manually change your color profiles that you're shooting JPEGs on. I was kind of unaware at first, and to be honest with you, I don't really like the picture controls that Nikon's have in here. I think there's like a Sunday that's kind of nice, and their carbon monochrome is kind of nice. But other than that, they're not really great to me. So you're gonna have to edit your images. And if you don't mind editing, sweet. If you mind editing, it's gonna be something you're gonna have to get over, or just don't buy this camera. Once I figured that I had to go in and edit my photos, it kind of gave me a different mind frame, and I was okay with the files that I was getting. I wasn't really in love with them at first, but then once I dove back into like actually editing and getting back into my old process, I can really say that this camera performs. The autofocus is fantastic. It's better than any Fuji camera that I've used. No shade to Fuji, but it's the only other comparison, right? But the autofocus is fantastic. Obviously, it's nowhere near Sony's, but it's still really, really good. I'm gonna jump into some things that I don't necessarily like about this camera, because obviously everything isn't glitz and glamour and gold and rainbow and ice creams, right? Some things just aren't the greatest, which is understandable. For a $1,900 camera, you're gonna have a lot of hopes and wishes, but understandably so, some things are just not gonna be where you want them to be at. The build quality in this camera is really great in my opinion. Some things feel really solid. Like I mentioned before, these dials, they feel really good in hand. But some parts also don't necessarily feel that great. This is gonna sound like a really nitpick like complaint. I hate the battery door on this thing. I absolutely hate it. It's like so flimsy, it's floppy. It's like, it feels so plastic. I swear if I caught this on something, it's gonna just rip it off. It does not feel great by any means. Another thing I don't like, a micro SD for the secondary SD card. Either give me two SDs or give me a single slot. I think it's cool to have a micro backup, but no, nah, I don't like it. Not my thing. The LCD on the back for reviewing images, I haven't even taken the plastic off mine yet. That's kind of funny. But the LCD on the back for reviewing images, this thing sucks. If you're using this to like really preview your images and you think you got a good one, don't judge this. This is terrible. I'd much rather you just shoot it, leave it hidden away, don't chimp, get home, pull them up on your computer. Much more accurate, looks way better. If you are gonna review your images, just review them through your EVF. To me, it's much better. I don't know, I hate this screen on the back. No go. I will say this camera markets that it has 14 stops of dynamic range. I won't lie to you. It does not handle overexposing very well at all. Highlight weighted metering has come in so handy for me because I am an overexposed shooter. I shoot a lot of things, maybe coming from film, maybe that's just where my shooting experience works, but I always typically give every camera that I shoot a little bit more light than necessary. I don't necessarily mind the look of blown out highlights too much, but this camera absolutely destroys the highlights. If you shoot this camera at a stopover, you are going to absolutely blow out your highlights and there's no recovering them. I'm lying, you can recover them, but it's still just a pain in the ass, right? Don't do it. Underexpose, expose normally, do not add that extra stop of light, and don't be like me. Don't give yourself a headache that doesn't need to be given or gave, whatever the proper terminology is. One thing that doesn't bother me that seems to bother everybody else is the grip on this camera. I necessarily don't mind the grip on this camera. It functions just fine for me. I hold it just like this. My other finger kind of doesn't sit on the camera. A lot of people buy a third-party grip that you just screw into the bottom plate. By all means, get one. I don't care. I hold a lot of film cameras. I have a Leica Q2 that has no grip on it as well. Maybe I'm just used to cameras with no grip. I feel like it has a little nub right there. But other than that, I hold this camera like this and I don't have a problem with it. I can reach this other custom function relatively pretty easy, and I don't know, it doesn't bother me to hold this camera, focus, and shoot with it. Last but not least, the one biggest gripe I have with this camera that bothers me to no end, and it doesn't seem to bother anybody else, but it bothers the shit out of me, is this ISO dial right here. There is a C on the ISO dial. I thought I could set my C to auto ISO. That is not the case on this camera. If I'm shooting this camera in manual mode and I rotate my dial, if I'm going in and out of shadows, it's kind of a pain in the butt because you can't set this to C and just let it automatically change your ISO. C just locks your ISO at 100. I don't get it. You can easily go in your menu system, map this C to auto ISO, but then you lose all manual functions of this dial, and this dial only becomes your max ISO. So the entire dial is now auto with a max ISO. If I want to switch back to manual, I have to go back into the menu systems, change this back to manual ISO. Seriously? Like, what a pain. Like, why? Why? I'll leave it at that. Why? Why not just make C auto? Maybe no one uses auto ISO. I'm the only person in the history of photography that uses auto ISO. It's ridiculous. I can also map my record button to auto ISO to make it a little bit faster, but then I don't have a record button. Why would I not want a record button? Why? I'll leave it at there. Nikon, you guys are bugging, man. Send a firmware update. Make this automatic ISO. I won't have any complaints. We're back to regularly scheduled programming. Other than that, I have no gripes about this camera anymore. This is my third and final video. I will not remake this one. I wasn't feeling it at first. I realized I love this camera a lot. It's probably one of my favorite shooting experience digital cameras that I have been able to physically use in a long time. It is way bigger than I assumed it was going to be. People say it's not big. They are so full of crap. This camera is huge in comparison to like a Sony a7C II or an X100V or any other camera in that category. It is not a very small camera. You have to have a relatively decent sized carryable bag. I can fit this in a Wander 3 liter, but it's very, very snug. I also have a 28mm lens on here, which is the SE version that kind of mimics the older F-mount lenses that I think is really rad. But if you went to go with any other Nikon glass, it's going to be huge. You are not going to have enough bag space for this camera. It's much bigger than I think it looks in video and in person, even though, with that being said, it's not fantastically large. It's not, you know, a Canon R1 or anything, but it is a relatively big camera. I think the viewfinder also makes it a little taller than most, but other than that, I have nothing else. This is a great camera. If you want one, get one. Don't buy it new, buy it used. Say that I sent you. I'm just kidding, you don't have to say that. But any questions? Do you have a Nikon Zf? Have you wanted a Nikon Zf? Do you like this camera? Do you hate it? What's your thoughts? If you have thoughts, if I was wrong at any point in this video, leave it below. Do me a favor, smash that like button, leave a comment, share with your friends. I love you guys. Thank you for tapping in with me. As always, until next time, be easy.